The Bideford witch trial resulted in hangings for witchcraft in England. Temperance Lloyd, Mary Trembles and Susannah Edwards from the town of Bideford in Devon were tried in 1682 at the Exeter Assizes in Rougemont Castle. Much of the evidence against them was hearsay, although there was a confession by Lloyd which she did not fully recant, even with her execution imminent. These women have been labelled as the last witches to be hanged in England, but there are subsequent cases which are not as well documented. In July 1682, Thomas Eastchurch, a Bideford shopkeeper, complained to some of the town's constables that Temperance Lloyd had been practising witchcraft. The constables arrested Temperance Lloyd and locked her in the old chapel at the end of the bridge, where she remained until taken before the justices Thomas Gist, Mayor of Bideford, and John Davy, Alderman, on the Monday morning. The charges were suspicion of having used some magical art, sorcery or witchcraft upon the body of Grace Thomas, and to have had the discourse or familiarity with the devil in the likeness or shape of a black man. Grace Thomas thought that Temperance Lloyd was responsible for her illness because the previous September Lloyd had wept with joy and expressed pleasure in seeing that Thomas had regained her health. Another woman, Anne Wakely, had seen a magpie fly into Thomas's chamber window. Suspecting witchcraft, she questioned Lloyd and found her in the company of another. They found in her secret parts 2 teats hanging high together like unto a piece of flesh that a child had sucked, and that each of the teat was about 1 inch in length. All the other evidence against Lloyd was hearsay, mostly claims to have overheard confessions by her. There were 6 such statements, including a claim by Anne Wakely that Lloyd was visited by the black man in the form of a bird. Wakely also said that Lloyd told her the black man had sucked her extra teats. Thomas Eastchurch's statement was held to be important, as he was a respected town gentleman. However, again, his evidence was simply that he overheard Lloyd's confession while she was in Bideford lockup the previous day. He stated that she confessed to meeting something in the likeness of a black man who tempted her to go and torment Grace Thomas. Eastchurch claimed that she had first refused but then agreed, following him to Thomas's house where the black man told her to pinch Thomas several times. She is then said on leaving the house to have seen a tabby cat go into Eastchurch's shop. She believed it to be the devil. At a later date, she met the black man again, who told her to kill Thomas, whereupon Temperance did go to his house with the black man, and that she went into the chamber where Grace Thomas lay, and further did confess that she did pinch and prick Grace Thomas again in several parts of her body, declaring with both of her hands how she did do it, and that thereupon Grace Thomas did cry out terribly. The black man, according to Eastchurch's statement, had told Lloyd she would be invisible during his attack. He also claimed that another similar attack on Thomas followed. Eastchurch then gave evidence that Grace Thomas sought medical help for her complaints. His wife Elizabeth, Grace's sister, stated that Thomas found 9 pricks in her knee, and suspecting witchcraft confronted Lloyd, who replied that she had pricked a piece of leather 9 times. The justices gave their permission for Lloyd to be questioned by the rector, Michael Ogleby. Although she confessed to turning into a cat, stealing a doll and placing it in Thomas's bedchamber, she denied using image magic despite specific questioning by Ogleby. William Herbert was the final witness against Temperance Lloyd. On 2nd of February 1671, he had heard his father William declare on his deathbed that Temperance Lloyd had bewitched him unto death. After he died, William saw marks on his body and had Lloyd charged with witchcraft. She was acquitted at the ensuing trial. On the 3rd of July, Temperance Lloyd was herself questioned by the justices, and she admitted all the charges made against her. The following day in prison, she admitted killing William Herbert, Lydia Berman and Anne Fellow, and blinding Jane Dillon in one eye. She admitted all of this as she believed she was still under the black man's protection. On the 8th of July, Temperance Lloyd was committed to Exeter jail to await trial for witchcraft. At the trial, she maintained her guilt. At the execution, she tried to give a reason for her actions. The devil met me in the street and bid me kill her, and because I would not, he bet me about the head and back. Mary Trembles and Susannah Edwards were investigated after a local woman, Grace Barnes, blamed Trembles for her illness. On the 18th of July 1682, Mary Trembles was denounced to the authorities and consequently arrested, along with Susannah Edwards, who had accompanied Trembles while they were begging for food. At the inquiry, Grace Barnes' husband John spoke first, accusing Trembles of hurting his wife by witchcraft. William Edwards also spoke, claiming to have overheard a confession by Susannah. People came to see the two women while they were in the town lockup. During Edwards' questioning, Anthony Jones, husband of John, drew attention to Edwards nervously wringing her hands. He accused her now of tormenting some person or other. He said her reply was, "Well enough, I will fit thee." He then left the Guildhall to help bring Grace Barnes to bear witness. On returning, Anthony Jones cried out, "Wife, I am now bewitched by this devil," and was overcome by a shaking fit, during which he leapt and capered like a madman, after which he fell unconscious for about a half an hour. After this disturbance, Grace Barnes did not make her statement. Instead, the justices questioned Mary Trembles. She answered all their charges, confessing to witchcraft but blaming Susannah Edwards for initiating her. Edwards followed with a confession of witchcraft, adding that she also tormented Dorcas Coleman, another local woman. The following day, Wednesday the 19th of July, Anthony Jones was sufficiently recovered from his fit to make his own statement, giving a report of the previous morning's event. Later that day, Mary and Susannah were searched for any suspicious marks on their bodies. Then they were sent to Exeter to join Temperance Lloyd while awaiting their trial. Grace Barnes in her statement repeated the story and added that she had some suspicion of Susannah Edwards because she would often call on her husband's house for frivolous reasons, or sometimes none at all. Most of the evidence against the two women came from statements of William Edwards and Joan Jones, who both claimed to be reporting what they had overheard. William Edwards said that the previous day, 17th of July, he did hear Susannah Edwards confess that the devil had carnal knowledge of her body, and that he had sucked her in her breast and in her secret parts, and further saith that he did hear her say that she and Mary Trembles did appear hand in hand invisible in John Barnes' house, where Grace, the wife of John Barnes, did lie in a very sad condition. And further saith that he did then also hear Susannah say that she and Mary Trembles were at that time come to make an end of her. Joan Jones claimed to have overheard Edwards making a full confession of witchcraft to a visitor from Torrington. She then reported this matter to the justices. After the man John Dunning had left the Guildhall without giving evidence, Jones elaborated on what she claimed to have heard. That Trembles asked Edwards how she had become a witch, and Edwards had replied that a man wearing clothes all of black had offered that she would never be in any want if only she did one thing for him, and that when she asked what, in God's name, that might be, the man vanished. Jones then stated that she heard Tremble and Edwards discuss pricking Grace Barnes, and further claimed of Edwards that the devil carried out about Edwards' spirit, that the devil in the form of a boy suckled at her breast, and that the devil had had sex with her 4 times. Jones also reported that Tremble argued with Edwards, accusing her of being made to be a witch, and that she would lay the blame for this on Edwards. Mary Trembles in her confession blamed Edwards for initiating her into witchcraft. Edwards in turn blamed Temperance Lloyd. Public opinion also turned more against Lloyd, the woman that has debauched the other two. While the two were in Exeter jail, stories of their dealing with the devil continued to circulate. A pamphlet of the time says they also asserted that the devil came with them to the prison door and there left them. Towards the end of July, 4 late statements were admitted to the record. The only one adding significant matter to the case was that of Dorcas Coleman, who recalled an illness that she had suffered in 1680. A doctor was unable to help and suggested witchcraft, perhaps to excuse his medical failings. Susannah Edwards was then called, and Coleman accused her of being her tormentor. The 3 women were tried before Sir Thomas Raymond, convicted by a jury and sentenced to death. The women were hanged on the 25th of August 1682 at the Heavy Tree Gallows outside of Exeter, and their bodies then dumped nearby in unconsecrated ground. Their death and burial locations are now within the car park of the St. Luke's campus of the University of Exeter, where presumably their bones still remain beneath the car park. Historian John Callow argues in his 2022 book, The Last Witches of England, that the conviction and execution of the 3 women was influenced by political and religious tension between nonconformist Whigs on the one hand and the adherents of Anglican Toryism on the other hand in the West Country after the English Civil War. The Witchcraft Act of 1735 finally concluded prosecutions for alleged witchcraft in England after sceptical jurists, especially Sir John Holt, had already largely ended convictions of alleged witches under English law.
If you like that, then check out our Patreon, where for just $5 a month you get access to exclusive shows like Real Monsters and Playing with Bones with Amy Rose, along with early access to all our minisodes and ad-free access to the Weekend Update and It's Alive! Not convinced yet? Well, head on over now and have 7 days on us. That's a 7-day free trial for all new members. That's It's Alive Pod on Patreon. It's Alive! All the guts and go with none of the guilt. See you on Wednesdays, unless you're on Patreon when you get us all week long.